Yo! What's up, diggity dogs?
You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another movie review. And today we got another double feature just because I happened to see both of these before I made the review for the one that was the main feature for this originally. So today I'll be talking about Terrifier 3 and All Hallows Eve, which is the precursor to Terrifier. Now, Terrifier 3 I went to see in theaters. It's the third movie I've seen in theaters in the last, 5 years. The other two being The Boy and the Heron, and for a relative's birthday, we went to see that M. Night Shyamalan's Daughters movie. I can't even fucking remember what it was called. It was not very good, to be honest. Thinking about it, I think it's called The Watchers. It sucked, so it's not really worth talking about. I don't really go to movie theaters anymore. I used to go all the time back when movies didn't suck. But for a long time, I've been saying Terrifier 3 is one of the things I'm excited for and really hoping that they wouldn't fuck it up. And I am happy to say it is fucking great. I honestly think it's the best Terrifier movie, and I think this movie has cemented for me that Terrifier, I think, might actually be my favorite slasher franchise now. Obviously, there's recency bias going on right now, too, obviously. Nightmare on Elm Street was my favorite before. As far as I can tell right now, in the heat of the moment, Terrifier is my favorite. We'll see if that sticks, but I fucking love it. I've always said that it can compete with the old ones, and it definitely can. It's fucking great. Now, Terrifier 3 takes a little bit of a different approach in that it's a Christmas-themed Terrifier movie. It still came out in October, but it is a Christmas movie, because it takes place on Christmas and has Art the Clown acquire a Santa suit to do a lot of the killings in it. It has a cold open and then a flashback to the end of the second movie, the cold open being 5 years after the second movie, and that's also where the main movie takes place. In this movie, they also brought back Victoria Hayes, the survivor from the end of the first Terrifier movie, who had her face eaten by Art the Clown, and then appeared in the post-credit scene of Terrifier 2 to give birth to Art's new head. In this, however, she's Art's sidekick. She's going around and helping Art do the killing, and she's working alongside him. She also does a lot of the talking, since Art doesn't make a single sound, as has been the case with all of these movies. Terrifier 3 expands on the concepts introduced in Terrifier 2, with Sienna and her brother reappearing in this movie, her brother Jonathan, as well as a new cast of characters, including their cousin Gabby and their aunt, whose name escapes me at this exact moment, and their uncle, whose name also escapes me at this moment. There's also a true crime podcast chick that really wants to interview Sienna or Jonathan. She initially wants to interview Jonathan, but then she wants to interview Sienna as soon as she sees her there. And we can see that Sienna has been traumatized by the Clown Cafe. It's really fucked her up. And we get to see more of the backstory of the Valkyrie angel-type character that was drawn for her by her father, which is the persona she took on to defeat Art at the end of 2. This movie also confirms that Art is a demon. Now, here's where things are going to start to get pretty spoilery, but in Terrifier 3, there's a really cool shower kill scene where Jonathan's friend and his girlfriend are getting it on in the shower, and then Art comes in, and his girlfriend being the podcast chick, Art comes in and kills them pretty brutally with a chainsaw. It's fucking great. He also looks into her eyes so she can see it's Art, because she really also wanted to see Art. She wanted to meet him, and now she got that chance. There's also a really great scene in a bar where Art gets his Santa suit by killing this guy who's a Santa Claus. After he buys him a drink, Art, pisses on the guy and causes a whole bunch of trouble. This movie also depicts Art killing kids. When he's going to the mall as a Santa, he gives a kid a present that blows up and kills a bunch of kids. He also kills a little boy in the opening sequence. You don't actually see the kill with that one, you just see the gore afterwards. But there were a lot of people that were freaked out that they're like, oh, he's killing kids in this one? That's not like Art. It's that's actually not true. He literally killed kids in All Hallows Eve, but we'll get to that later in the video. As with Terrifier 2, this one is really upped the comedic angle. It's in a lot of ways, these movies have become really fucked up comedies with Art's reactions and funny little goofy things he does while he's killing people. There's also a really cool kill where they shove a tube down a chick's throat, put a rat in it, then light its tail so it runs down her throat, and then they give her a Colombian necktie and kill her. And it's just as gory as 2. Lots of gore in these movies. I think that overall this one's more brutal than 2, but the bed kill in 2 is probably still the most brutal kill in the series. But it was a whole lot of fun, and I really liked the ending to this one. I liked that instead of Sienna defeating Art, she actually loses, Art gets away, Gabby falls into a portal to hell, and then Art just runs out of there. And then Sienna is left without the sword, because it also fell into the portal to hell. All of her family dead. They actually killed Jonathan off-screen for a bait and switch. which is a little disappointing, but it did make the bait and switch effective. And just her left, feeling hopeless. It's great. It's such a good downer ending. There was actually 2 families that brought their kids to see this movie when I went to the theaters. There was a family that had a little girl with them that left as soon as Victoria started pleasuring herself with the broken glass. But granted, you didn't actually see the insertion or anything. You just saw the hand movements and stuff. It was really gross, mind you. Victoria is pretty gross in this one. Just as gross as Art, if not grosser because of her deformed face. And though the family that had the little girl left as soon as that happened, the other family that had their kids that were in front of us, who had 2 sons there, stayed and watched the whole thing. Jonathan has a lot more of a muted presence in this one than he did in the second movie, which is a shame, because Jonathan was such a great character in the second movie, being this kind of nerdy kid, but who's also, like, kind of obsessed with gore and, like, true crime and stuff like that. Whereas in this one, it makes sense. He's traumatized now. He's in college in this one, which I thought was odd, because I thought he was a lot younger than that. Apparently the actor's 19, so it makes sense, plus it is 5 years in the future. But nevertheless, the character's still a lot older than I presumed that he was in the second movie. There's also a fun musical number that plays during one of the scenes called A Terrifier Christmas. Pretty fucking great. Although, strangely, this one didn't have the Terrifier theme song in it at all. It had some of the other songs from the original movie soundtrack, but not the actual theme song to the main movie. That said, I was pleasantly surprised with just how gory and fun and hilarious that this movie was. Terrifier 3 was an absolute treat, and I'm absolutely glad that I went to see it. Side note, though, going to the theater, there's no one who sells you the tickets anymore. It's all fucking, like, automated kiosks now, which, you know, I don't like, but I also get it because the theaters are failing, and in a lot of ways I feel like they deserve to fail, but, like, you know, it is sad, because going to the movie theater is something I've loved to do for most of my life. Obviously, movies fucking suck now. Luckily, this movie blew fucking Joker 2 out of the water, with how much of a fucking piece of shit that was. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to Terrifier 4 now, after how great Terrifier 3 was. And 4 is supposed to be the end, although I've heard rumors that they might split it in 2. To do like a 4 part 1 and a 4 part 2. I don't know about that, we'll see. But I am really looking forward to 4. And now on to the other movie we'll be reviewing tonight, that being All Hallows Eve, which is the precursor to Terrifier. It actually combines the 2 previous Art the Clown shorts that predate the first Terrifier movie, being the Ninth Circle, which was the original appearance of Art the Clown. He's only in it tangentially. That's the first segment of it, because this is an anthology movie, where he drugs a chick and then gives her to a cult, and then they torture her and do all this stuff. There's these weird rituals and all sorts of crazy stuff, impregnation and cutting the baby out, really crazy stuff. And the wraparound segment of this is a babysitter who finds a VHS tape in one of the kids' candy bags, and then the kids want to watch it, and so then they start watching it. She eventually tells the kids that they can't watch any more of it after the baby scene where they cut the baby out of her. But then after the kids go to bed, the babysitter starts watching more of it, and that's where we get the second and third segments. And naturally, the VHS tape being the prominent thing in the wraparound does remind me a lot of that movie VHS, which is also really good. The second segment is the only one that was produced specifically for this movie, other than the wraparound, of course. And in my opinion, the second segment is easily the weakest and most boring segment of the 3. The first is okay. It's not, like, great. It just has art in it in the one scene, and then, you know, there's the cult stuff. The real highlight of this movie is the wraparounds and the third segment. We'll get to the third segment in a minute, though. But the second segment is about this alien that goes into a chick's house, and her husband, like, painted a painting of Art the Clown, and that's, like, the twist at the end. That's how Art ties into the second one, very tangentially. Like I said, the second segment was actually kind of boring and really dragged the movie down for a minute there. But the wraparound, like I said, was really good. The first segment was decent, but then we get to the third segment, and the third segment is fucking fantastic. So the third segment is the original 2011 Terrifier short that he made to have, like, sort of a concept for Art the Clown, like, once he figured out what he wanted to do with the character. Once the third segment started up, the movie is fucking great. It's absolutely one of the Terrifier movies at that point. The original 2011 Terrifier short is fucking amazing. It's on the same level as Terrifier 1 with how good it is. Lots of gore, and really intimidating Art the Clown, some Art shenanigans with the shrugging and the messing with people and stuff. And in the Ninth Circle, the first segment, he did honk the horn at people like he does in all the movies. And of course, he does pull out a gun in this one, just like he does in every Terrifier movie, which I always love when he just pulls out a gun. It's so funny. But eventually the wraparound segment ends with the kids being killed, which I think was maybe sort of homaged in the cold open to Terrifier 3, because you don't see the kids be killed, but you see their gore everywhere. Whereas in Terrifier 3, when the little boy gets killed, it's the same thing. You don't see him get killed, but then the mom discovers the gore everywhere. I think that was sort of an homage to the end of the wraparound in All Hallows Eve. Art the Clown is played by a different guy in All Hallows Eve than he is in the rest of the franchise, and although he's not as good in the third segment and wraparound in particular, he still does a phenomenal job. I think he was a little bit weaker in the ninth circle, and the makeup wasn't as good. But that was literally the first appearance of Art, so I get it. This movie doesn't have any happy endings or anything. All of them end with the protagonist being killed by the creatures, be it Art or the alien or the cultists. Also, the 2011 Terrifier one, the third segment, yet again, had a film grain on it that made it look very vintage and sort of grindhousey, which I thought was really cool. Overall, All Hallows Eve is a pretty good movie. It would have been great if the whole thing was just the third segment as a movie, which granted I think is why Terrifier 1 happened in the first place, you know, make that into a whole movie of its own. But there's also a really cool scene where he decapitates someone with a hacksaw, which is fucking great. But again, a lot of the concepts in this short were eventually adapted in one way or another into Terrifier 1. But yeah, both these movies were great. Like I said, I love the Terrifier franchise. I'm gonna have to pick up All Hallows Eve now. All Hallows Eve does have some moments that I'm not the biggest fan of, in all honesty. I'd probably fast forward the second segment at the very least upon rewatch, just because the second segment is kind of dull. It is funny the way the alien moves around really weirdly in the second segment, but it's still nothing compared to the third segment, especially. But even the first segment is better than the second segment. The second segment is obviously the weakest one of the bunch. There are sequels to All Hallows Eve, but they're completely unrelated, don't have Art the Clown in it, so I'm probably not going to bother seeing those, or maybe I will, but, you know, it's not quite the same. But I do like watching these. This has been really fun. I do really like the Terrifier franchise, and I'm excited for its future, and I am glad that it has an end game. I know there's also a video game. That's really cool, too. I do like how big this is getting, because, you know, normally I worry when things I like get big, but with something like Terrifier, they've retained the amount of gore and, violence in these movies with each one, so I'm still very optimistic for Terrifier 4, and again, he does have an endgame in mind. But that's all I really have to say. I hope you enjoyed this review double feature. This has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a good one. Toodles!
I'm a bit of an elbow man myself, actually. Bit different, bit weird, not sexual.
I'm gonna fucking die here, Jack!
Subscribe to Fugitive Red Eye.